Hi there, I'm Dean Heskin, President and CEO of Swiss American Trading, and you are tuned into our podcast, The Secret War on Cash, where we take a hard look at some of the things that have been taking place or developing in our economy, and not only our economy, but not just domestically, but abroad as well. I discuss these things quite typically, quite often with my co-host, Chris Agelastos. There he is. Chris, good morning.
Ah,
Thanks for joining us today.
yeah, thanks for having me.
You sound better. I know you're getting over your little bug that you've been carrying for the last few
Yep.
days. Great to see you
Slowly
as
but
usual.
surely.
Yeah, well, that's good. It's tis the season for friends, family, holidays, and flu bugs. So you can get a little bit of all of it. Well,
Yeah.
let's get right in. Actually, we're going to do something kind of different today because in our last podcast we were discussing BRICS and try and mix it up a little bit to not to get repetitive, but we're going to get repetitive because BRICS is actually something that has gotten quite interesting as a direct result of a change in leadership in the United States by way of Trump becoming our new president-elect and soon to be president. And before he's even stepped foot into the White, well, I don't think he stepped foot yet into the White House this time around, but before he even takes his oath, put it that way, and is sworn in, he has already gone guns blazing at this alliance known as BRICS. And as we covered in our last podcast, in fact, CC will put up our first article here. The interesting thing is, you had Trump firing at Putin, excuse me, saying he's going to impose 100% tariffs. You had Putin firing back, saying that'd be a mistake. That's going to backfire on you. And now we're hearing and seeing in this Zero Hedge article here how Trump's threats against BRICS are based on false premises. And now I do find this interesting because in the roughly year and a half, give or take, that we've been covering BRICS, there have been numerous times where at least the perspective or impression that I got from it, where Putin, I'll use the word gleefully, was discussing the whole notion or concept of de-dollarization of the world economy. Okay,
Yeah.
where there were even statements made that the dollar is dead, the dollar is going away. And the reason I want to emphasize that, because in this first article, as you start to read through it, and for those of you tuning in, you'll see the link in the description there that you can look at your leisure. But Putin starts talking about how um, he doesn't hate the dollar, okay, and actually, he he said it would be useful he would like to be able to use the dollar.
Yep.
Now, we could pull just through some of our old podcasts, some statements or remarks, if they were taken correctly, and I believe they were, that he has repetitively or repeatedly said the contrary to that, said the opposite.
Yep.
So, with this being said, I mean, I don't necessarily, I would agree in terms of concept or logic that Russia being able to use the dollar would be fantastic. They are, however, saying they would like to use it in conjunction with the BRICS alliance and what have you, continuing to rally and roll on. Is that even possible though? Because really a lot of the strength in BRICS that has been talked about over and over and over again was coming by way of de-dollarization, which would help the domestic economy, would help their domestic currencies and things of this nature. So I know this is a tough question, maybe, Chris, for you to answer, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Can BRICS, the alliance, continue to exist and the rest of the world still get along with the US dollar and continue to use the US dollar?
I think it will be a mix of the two. I know Trump doesn't President Trump certainly doesn't want anybody stepping back from using the dollar. At the same time, BRICS was created to help strengthen their own currencies, member nations' currencies, and to be able to do some cross-border trade. So I think realistically, what's going to happen here is that BRICS may, President Trump may be able to get them to slow down some of the rhetoric and the whole ditching the dollar conversation. I don't think that means that they're going to completely stop using their own currencies. And yes, Putin has come out here and said, hey, I like the dollar. I'd love to be able to use it. That it was the U.S. that sort of forced our hand, and I
which
think
is
that's
true.
his way of, yeah, absolutely, and I think that's also his way of kind of saying, hey, let's talk about this a little bit, and everybody knows that one of the big goals here would be for President Trump and the U.S. to lift some of the sanctions. Now, they talk about in this article, he probably can't just completely reverse those sanctions, or it would make him look like he's giving in fact, to Russia and to BRICS. But he could um, loosen it up a little bit, and they've already had talks of things that certain transactions and things that they could allow some leniency on. So I think gradually lifting some of the sanctions would send a message to Russia and BRICS that we want you to continue using the dollar, and BRICS maybe slowing down on the hey, let's recruit everybody to dump the dollar. Those two things may happen, and would be a decent compromise.
Right. Well, and it's refreshing, as we've talked about in the earlier podcast, that to see, which is, I think, somewhat to be expected with Trump, but how just aggressively, again, before he's even stepped foot into the office, he is going after these things, and having, you know really productive discussions, like with other countries that are really,
Yeah,
like to your point, Chris, there's discussions, there's, trying to figure out some kind of potential resolve. That's, it is refreshing to see because, again, as we've been covering this whole situation, it has been, radio silence with the Biden
yeah,
administration, radio silence
yeah,
from really anything or anyone pertaining to the U.S. in terms of what BRICS has been doing in this effort that they've been, kind of pushing along. Where again, I can't stress this
yeah,
enough. I mean, this isn't just, yes, you have those five nations that represent BRICS, but they had over 160 countries, I believe it was, that showed up at their summit.
yeah,
And if nothing, even if they didn't all show, for sure, they've all kind of weighed in on this discussion and expressed an interest in it. So,
yeah,
that's now the- everything you said, couldn't agree with you more. Now, getting into the second article, I'm gonna have another question for you here. Two countries paying 80% of trade in local currencies, not the US dollar. Okay. So, right in the beginning here, BRICS member Russia confirmed it settled 80% of trade with its neighboring country, Kazakhstan, in local currencies and not the US dollar. And I'll
mhm,
leave it at that because, well, look, Russian President Vladimir Putin confirmed the development, saying that both nations have agreed to strengthen their trade ties.
yeah,
So, without reading too much into it, the reason I wanted to use this, and the question I have for you, Chris, is that does this headline or does this article perhaps speak to part of the complexity of this BRICS situation? And what I mean by that is that, a lot, you can't unring the bell.
yeah,
Okay, now things can change, things do ebb and flow as far as markets and economies, and there is a, kind
hmm,
of an evolving that takes place. But what this speaks to me of is that, again, going back to the fact that the United States is the one who really kind of forced this issue of BRICS in the first place by the sanctions and various things that they were imposing on Russia. And again, it's been a growing concern, this whole BRICS alliance. The bottom line is, are they too firmly entrenched already with what some of the changes they've made or done, where again we can't unring this bell? Or is this something that, potentially could see a complete reversal? And I mean, I guess, does BRICS fall by the wayside at that point?
No, I don't. I really don't believe we'll see any sort of um, going back to the way things were. I think really the goal here, a realistic goal, I should say, for the U.S. is to get BRICS to stop advancing their movement as quickly as they have been. So I think if we can slow it and provide incentive for these other nations to continue to use the dollar, strengthen the dollar, so that they are more interested in using it. maybe some damage in their own economies, hurting their own currencies, would push them back towards the dollar as well, because that's why they started using it, to begin with many years ago, was for the strength and stability. So I think if President Trump can do that, he can strengthen the dollar, strengthen some of these relations, and negotiate a bit with them to slow things down. I think that will still be a win for the dollar. But like you said, look, they're already, they mentioned in here 80% of trade between these other nations is being done in their own currencies, between 80 and 85%. Um, they enjoy that. That's a good thing for them, and so I don't think they're gonna completely go backwards. And when I looked a little bit, further into this, and found out that the major sectors that are impacted by BRICS, moving away from the dollar: banking and finance, obviously, international settlements, international trade and investment, and consumer goods and retail. And those are three whoppers, right? Any one of those areas, losing the dollar's influence would be a big deal. So I think that BRICS certainly has some leverage, and the US also has leverage. And that's why I think a more realistic expectation is that we can meet in the middle, slow things a little bit on BRICS, incentivize them to want to continue to use the dollar. And that might be a solution that works for both parties. But no, I certainly don't think they're going to say, you know what, let's give up all this leverage that we've created and go back to the way things were, and let the U.S. Run a completely dominant area of the world's finance with their currency.
Right. Well, and that speaks to Chris. One reason why I am really, I can legitimately say this. I am particularly interested to watch this situation
Hmm.
develop more so than I've been on really much of anything in the economy in quite a while. In so much as that, again, everything that we have covered in our podcasts for some time now,
Hmm.
the anyone who was on board with what BRICS is and what BRICS represented, it was really synonymous with replacing dollars with domestic currencies and or remember the new BRICS currency. The new BRICS
That's right.
currencies is anticipated or expected to have a 40% backing by gold and the
Yeah.
remaining 60 to be backed by the participating nations currencies. So it's not like number one, it's not just going from a local or domestic currency to back to US dollars, but they already have a proposed currency on the table.
Yeah.
And so I don't see how you back this bus up because it's
Yeah.
there's again, if people are going to continue on with BRICS, that is going to stand in direct conflict of that. And then you throw into the mix, I mean, again, I love the strength in Trump and I love the direction he's pushing for. But remember, we always still have that, I would say, pretty significant rain cloud hanging over our head of our debts and our deficits that
Yeah.
that does not make for a strong bargaining chip in terms of buying into someone's economy when you have
Right.
that type of. I mean, we've already seen for how many years now that foreign countries were abandoning U.S. treasuries and U.S. debt to get away
Yeah.
from the weakness and the vulnerability there. So that's why it's going to be, I think, a very interesting thing to see how it all plays out. And
Yeah.
now, and I will say we've talked about China a little bit. We've talked more about Russia because Putin's been at the forefront of this.
Hmm.
India did already seem to, kind of soften their stance a little bit
Right.
in terms of
Yeah.
their BRICS participation. But understand too, you're talking BRICS nations. Again, we talk about the debts and deficits of the United States. If I remember the statistic or the percentage correct, I believe the BRICS participating nations represent like 70% of all the uh, minerals, natural resources, et cetera, that exist in the world.
Yeah.
So,
They've got a
that
lot of
that gives them
influence.
that's some leverage there for sure,
Yep.
for sure.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Well, Chris, do it again. Tell us how we can find out more about this secret war on cash, maybe about how to diversify into some gold. What can people do to maybe make some changes that will help stand in the way of some of these things?
Yeah. Well, it all starts with some education. That's why we offer these materials. You can visit the website at SwissAmerica.com. or give us a call 24 hours a day, or a text at 800-289-2646. So either the website or the phone number, and again, either call or text. If you're like me and you can't sleep and you're watching a podcast at 1 in the morning, just shoot us a text, and we'll get back to you the next morning and gather your info, and get a packet sent off to you. But the first step is really just understanding more about what is happening, and once you have a good handle on that, it makes it easier to kind of plan a solution, or at least get yourself some protection, as much as reasonably possible.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. And if you haven't contacted Swiss America already, please do so as soon as you can, because a lot is changing and things I think are going to continue to change pretty quickly here, especially if Trump has anything to do with it. And that could
Yeah,
be a very good thing. They're expecting big things out of gold and silver over the course of this year. When I say they, I
yeah,
mean numerous experts and analysts out there have said that this has all been a very positive shift or change for metals. And so something to take advantage of. And also take advantage of this podcast by subscribing if you have not already, and please follow us on social media as well. The only other thing I will leave you with is please do have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. And Chris, thank you again for joining us and all the information.
thanks a lot. Take care.